John, thanks for joining us today. We're here for a birthday party of sorts, aren't we? Here to celebrate the life and work of William Shakespeare and the history of Bell Shakespeare. So thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Andy.
John, why is it after 450 years we're still talking about William Shakespeare and his work?
People still want to see it, so I think the fact that he was writing for actors and a live audience, that's what's kept it going.
Yeah, so he understood the human condition, perhaps, do you think?
I think he understood the human condition more than any other artist that one can think of. All great artists can look into the heart of things, but I guess it's the range of his concerns. The fact that he could write comedies and tragedies and history plays and fantasies, from sort of brutal realism to lyric poetry, and with a very keen eye. The Polish critic Jan Kot said Shakespeare is cruel but true. I think that's essential. All his plays have a degree of cruelty, even the comedies, and yet they are truthful observations. And there's a degree of compassion to offset that, so it never gets sloppy or sentimental, and it never really tips into cynicism, although it comes close in a play like, say, Troilus and Cressida. But there's a keen eye, an understanding, a large degree of compassion, but also something that is relentless and says, you can't get away with that. I can see right through you. That's the artist speaking.
It's a hard question to ask, but I'm going to ask it. If you could pick one or two plays that were standout favourites for you, what would they be?
There are at least 37 plays, and to pick just two is virtually impossible. I guess King Lear would have to be the one I most admire, in a sense, because it's so uncompromising, it goes so deep, it is so cruel but true. It's a staggering monument. It's very hard to bring off, it's very hard to perform, it's even hard to watch, because it's so demanding and so relentless. That's probably the one I admire most in terms of an artist's aspiration. In terms of the one you're most warm to, I guess it's some of the comedies like Much Ado or Twelfth Night. One really warms. There's a great sort of invitation to the audience to come and join in the fun. Hamlet's the most varied and unexpected, full of spontaneity. So they've all got different qualities. And it's interesting how they tend to come and go in terms of popularity. And sometimes the history plays seem to really tell us what the world is really all about in times of political crisis. At other times, the comedies, it's all about youth and love and sex and time passing. At other times, the tragedies, that's what life's all about. It depends on the zeitgeist to some extent. And also it depends on certain key actors and productions. An actor comes along and really makes a part work, and suddenly public interest is revived. Here's a new great Lear or a new great Hamlet or something, or a new great Rosalind, and then that play becomes flavour of the month, year, whatever. So there's an ever-shifting diorama.
Yeah, so in a sense, you've talked about why Shakespeare is still talked about today, and the diversity of the work and the breadth of characters and the way that different plays come into fashion at different times has probably helped to sustain the work through the years.
That's where Shakespeare leaves everybody else for dead. It's that diversity and range of interest, range of understanding, and just the breadth of vision about all of society. He doesn't write just one class, which most writers tend to do. Take someone like Noel Coward or Tennessee Williams. They write about one little group of people that they know very well. Shakespeare goes from the top, from King Lear down to the fool, Hamlet to the gravedigger, Henry V to the common soldiers. He understands the whole lot, and they all have an equal voice. No one is preferred, and that gives it a great... I think Hamlet's a very democratic character. Hamlet talks to everybody. He wants to know about gravediggers and about soldiers and about, actors. And I think that's Shakespeare talking. He had an interest in everybody too, just as Hamlet does.
Now, John, if you were to hop onto Google today and type in Shakespeare conspiracy theories, you would see a lot of conjecture and speculation as to who really wrote all of these plays. So let us in on the secret. Who really wrote William Shakespeare's work?
Well, unfortunately, it was a guy from Stratford-upon-Avon called William Shakespeare. To me, there's no doubt about it. And all his contemporaries, hailed him as their fellow actor, their fellow writer. They all wrote tributes to him. They acted with him day by day, year after year, in his own company. When he died, they all said, Ben Jonson said, there's his picture, this is the man, I knew him, I loved him well, these are his plays. I mean, what more proof do you want? It's all there. And all these crazy theories have come up since. To do with snobbery, really. They say no, tradesman's son from Stratford-on-Avon could have written all this work. Look at Bach or Mozart. They all came from that sort of background. Most great artists do, because they have to work for a living and they've got to be the best and they've got to compete. That's how you become a great artist, through hard work. And genius is scattered here and there. It pops up in a Picasso or a Mozart or a Shakespeare from time to time. So, to me there's no doubt about it. He had a very privileged upbringing, really. He was the son of the mayor of Stratford, the well-to-do family. He got a free education at one of the best grammar schools in England, where they learned Latin and Greek. They had to act in Latin and Greek. They had to debate in Latin and Greek, both sides of an argument with equal conviction. That's a great training for a dramatist. And then he joined as an actor some of the best acting companies in the country and developed his craft as an actor and as a writer, collaborating, patching up old plays, and bit by bit starts to produce his own work. So the actual sort of line of his career is very easy to understand.
Looking back to your formative years, when did you first encounter Shakespeare and how did you feel when you did?
It's hard to remember the exact moment. I think one of the key moments was listening to the radio. The ABC used to put on a play every Sunday night, some modern plays, some classics, and I remember hearing Julius Caesar when I was about maybe 13, 14, and it really grabbed me. I liked the story, I loved the language, and because the voices were so close in radio, the voice is just there in your ear. It's very compelling. Sometimes in the theatre, the voices are up there and the actors are far away. Radio is very intimate, and the language is all you've got. So to listen to a Shakespeare play on radio can be very, very involving. I think that may have been my first taste. But then we had a great English teacher when I was when I was 15. Fantastic English teacher. He was the football coach as well as the English teacher. A great big burly guy with a huge voice. And he just came in and threw copies of Midsummer Night's Dream on the desk and said, open it up. We'd never heard of Midsummer Night's Dream or Shakespeare. And then he started to act it for us. We didn't read it, he acted the whole play. He took all the parts, he described the sets, the lighting, the costumes, the pratfalls, the whole bit. He'd obviously seen productions of it because he was an actor, director manqué, and we couldn't wait for the next scene from Shakespeare. And then he took us off to the movies to see Olivia's Henry V, Hamlet, Richard III. And it was the day I saw Henry V, I walked out of that theatre and I said, I'm going to be an actor and I'm going to play that part and all those other Shakespeare parts, and that's going to be my life. I just knew it. And he encouraged me in that regard, and then his successor was an equally brilliant English teacher, and he said to me, you're going to go to university and then you're going to be an actor, and that's it. There's no question about it. So you don't often get that sort of encouragement from school teachers. They generally say, get a degree and then get a sensible job and act in your spare time. But these guys pushed me into it, for which I'm very grateful. Actually, I was a pretty ordinary student. I was a very poor, uninspired sort of student in most subjects. But when I discovered theatre and Shakespeare, that really got me going, and I started to do well in all my subjects, and education started to mean something. I suddenly got it. And Shakespeare was the kind of the trigger for that. So I've always understood the importance of good teaching and inspiring teaching, and how Shakespeare, poetry, drama can set your life's course in a way. For some people it's chemistry, for some people it's sport, it's all sorts of things for different people. But a lot of people can be really inspired by Shakespeare, for instance.
John, thanks so much for your time today. It's been really interesting having a conversation with you about the history of Bell Shakespeare and the legacy of William Shakespeare, and in 450 years' time, who knows, maybe there'll be a couple of people doing the same thing.
Let's hope so. Yeah. Thanks, Andy.
Peter, thank you very much for joining us today to celebrate William Shakespeare's birthday.
Thanks, Andy.
Why is it, Peter, after so long, 4.5 centuries later, we're still talking about William Shakespeare?
Well, I think perhaps because we're still performing him. I think as well as somebody who's created these kind of extraordinary stories, incredibly diverse stories, these are actually just words to be said, and these are to be performed. So in fact, it's constantly alive. it's constantly being reinvented every time we do it. And one of the great pleasures in my job is that when you come to approach a play, there's so many interesting decisions to be made. There's so many things to kind of discover, and you can never quite nail it down. And so then you want to have another go, and you want to come at it again. And I think for actors also, the idea of performing these plays is that he's kind of constantly mining them for more meaning and kind of more joy. So it's absolutely no surprise to me that we're still doing them, and I would suggest we'll keep doing them ad infinitum.
If you had to pick a particular play that really stands out for you, that's closest to your heart, I know this is a hard question.
Yeah.
What would you pick?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that by not answering that, because there's so many. There's so many. I mean, my first kind of where I really connected first was with Romeo and Juliet, and that's probably because of the Zeffirelli film, which I saw when I was very young, and it's actually probably because there's an incredible shot in that film of Olivia Hussey, and she does a slow motion blink. It is so sexy. It was so exciting for me at 13 years old, and that incredible score and the costumes and everything. So Romeo and Juliet was kind of pivotal for me. But at the other end of the spectrum, King Lear, I find the kind of unrelentingly, magnificently bleak. It's kind of symphonic as a poem, and I absolutely delight in it. But then there's The Tempest, Shakespeare's last play, which I just adore. There's something so kind of, there's a roar inside Prospero, and there's something so passionate, and his revenge is so deep, but within that it's a play about forgiveness. And like Romeo and Juliet, it's also a play about young love. And I find Miranda and Ferdinand's scenes so beautiful in their innocence and in their discovery. That's a play that's very dear to me.
Can you pick out any particular performances that you've seen down the years that really stand out for you?
Yeah, I reckon in the mid-90s, Richard Roxburgh did a Hamlet at Belvoir Street that was pretty good. It was really smart, and it was a bit naughty, and all the kind of good things that Hamlet should be. It was an exceptional cast actually that year, and I saw that when the play was in its second iteration. The first time Jackie McKenzie was playing Ophelia, which I missed, and I think she would have been marvellous, and evidently was. But the year I saw it, Cate Blanchett was playing Ophelia, and so before I suppose Cate Blanchett was Cate Blanchett, and that was pretty good. And then in the early 2000s, I saw a guy called John Bell play Richard III.
Never heard of him.
It didn't go on to much, but in this performance, it was astonishing really, and again, very naughty. One of the things about John Bell is that he's a leading man, obviously, but he's also, I think, one of our great character actors. And that character was just deliciously awful, kind of sexy in a really dirty way, but naughty and mischievous and power hungry, and it was exhilarating actually. It was a very good production, it was an exhilarating performance.
Peter, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great talking to you, and happy birthday, Shakespeare.
Happy birthday, Shakespeare. Thanks, Andy.